The desperate plea. The last hope. The emergency session of the Zephyrian Collective had been going on for 18 hours. Ambassador Nexura watched the holographic displays with growing dread as another star system winked out of existence. The Kepler 442 system, home to 3 billion Ulterian colonists, had gone silent just like the others. No distress calls, no evacuation signals, nothing. Just empty space where a thriving civilization had existed mere days before. Nexura's crystalline skin shifted from its usual blue to a deep purple, a sign of extreme stress among her people. Around the circular chamber, representatives from 8 different species displayed their own forms of distress. The Valantian's feathers had turned completely black, while the cetacean delegates produced low, mournful songs that filled the chamber with an ominous harmony. "That makes 14 systems in 6 months," announced Prime Coordinator Zenth, his mechanical voice echoing through the chamber. The cyborg leader of the Nexus Coalition had been tracking the disappearances with growing alarm. "The pattern is clear. Whatever this force is, it moves systematically, consuming everything in its path." The entity they faced had no name in any known language. The few survivors who had escaped the initial attacks described it as a living darkness that devoured not just matter and energy, but the very fabric of space itself. Scientists called it the Void Swarm, though no one truly understood what it was or where it had come from. What they did know was terrifying enough. Dr. Kithara, the collective's chief xenobiologist, activated her personal display. Her tentacles moved gracefully as she manipulated the data, showing the assembly what they already feared to see. Analysis of the consumed systems shows complete molecular dissolution, not just planets and stars, but the quantum structure of space-time itself has been digested. Whatever this entity is, it doesn't just destroy, it unmakes reality. A heavy silence fell over the chamber. The Zephyrian Collective had faced many challenges in their 1,000-year history. Wars had been fought and won through careful diplomacy. Plagues had been cured through scientific cooperation. Natural disasters had been overcome through resource sharing and mutual aid. But this was different. This was an enemy that couldn't be negotiated with, couldn't be understood, and seemed impossible to stop. "Our defensive fleets have been ineffective," admitted Admiral Thorne, the military representative from the Ta Siti Republic. Her usually proud bearing was diminished by months of failed engagements. "Every weapon we deploy, every strategy we attempt, the swarm adapts within hours. It learns from our attacks and becomes stronger. We're not fighting an enemy, we're feeding it information." Nexura stood up, her tall, elegant form commanding attention. As the collective's chief diplomatic officer, she had spent decades building bridges between species, finding common ground where others saw only differences. But diplomacy required 2 parties willing to communicate, and the Void Swarm had shown no interest in anything except consumption. "We need allies," she announced, her voice carrying the harmonic overtones unique to her species. Species outside the collective, with different technologies, different approaches to conflict. "We've exhausted our own resources and strategies. We need fresh perspectives." Prime Coordinator Zent's optical sensors focused on her. "The Andromedans have already declined our request for assistance." The Spiral Arm Federation offered prayers and good wishes, but no military support. "The Core Worlds Union is too far away to help before the swarm reaches our territory." "Who else is there?" Nexura activated her own display, showing a 3-dimensional map of the local galactic region. Her fingers traced paths through space, highlighting various star systems and their inhabitants. Most showed red indicators, meaning they had already been contacted and had either refused to help or were incapable of providing meaningful assistance. But there was one system that glowed yellow, indicating potential but unexplored options. A small, unremarkable star system on the outer rim of the galaxy. 3rd planet from its sun, mostly water, with a single species that had only recently achieved faster-than-light travel. "There is one possibility," Nexura said, her voice carrying a note of uncertainty. a young species in the Sol system. They call themselves humans. Our long-range scouts report they have developed interstellar capability within the last 50 years. Primitive by our standards, but they show remarkable technological advancement for such a young civilization. Dr. Cathera's tentacles writhe with what might have been amusement. A species barely out of their home system. What could they possibly offer against a threat that has consumed 14 advanced civilizations? Dr. Cathera's tentacles writhe with what might have been amusement. A species barely out of their home system. What could they possibly offer against a threat that has consumed 14 advanced civilizations? Perhaps nothing, Nexera admitted. But they are the only species within range that we haven't approached. And there's something else. Our scouts report unusual readings from their system. High levels of electromagnetic radiation consistent with advanced weapons testing. For a species so young, they seem remarkably focused on military technology. Admiral Thorne leaned forward with interest. Military technology. What kind of weapons are they developing? Nuclear fusion weapons, directed energy systems, and something called kinetic bombardment platforms. The scouts also detected massive space-based defense networks around their planet. It seems these humans have prepared extensively for interstellar conflict, despite having no known enemies. This information caused a stir throughout the chamber. Most species developed space travel for exploration and trade, adding military capabilities only when threats emerged. A species that built weapons before encountering enemies was unusual, perhaps even concerning under normal circumstances. It could be worth investigating, Prime Coordinator Zenth concluded after processing the data. Ambassador Nexera, you have diplomatic authority to make contact with this human species, assess their capabilities and willingness to assist. We cannot afford to overlook any potential allies. The journey to the Sol system took 3 days through hyperspace. Nexera used the time to study what little information the collective had gathered about humans. What she found both intrigued and disturbed her. This species had a documented history of nearly constant warfare spanning thousands of years. They had fought with clubs and stones, then swords and arrows, then explosives and bullets, and finally with weapons capable of destroying their entire planet. Most troubling was that they seemed to have never stopped fighting. Even as they reached for the stars, humans continued to prepare for war. Their literature was filled with stories of conflict. Their entertainment focused on battles and conquest. Their entire social structure seemed built around the concept of organized violence. Yet they had also created art of stunning beauty, made scientific discoveries that had advanced their civilization by millennia in mere centuries, and shown remarkable cooperation when faced with common threats. They were a contradiction, peaceful and violent, creative and destructive, unified and divided all at the same time. As Nexera's ship dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system, she was immediately contacted by human defense forces. The response was instantaneous and professional, indicating a level of military readiness that impressed her despite her concerns about their warlike nature. Unknown vessel, this is Luna Defense Command. You have entered restricted space. Identify yourself and state your intentions. Nexera activated her translation protocols and responded. This is Ambassador Nexera of the Zephyrian Collective. I come in peace, seeking diplomatic contact with human leadership regarding a matter of galactic importance. The response came quickly. Ambassador Nexera, you are cleared to approach Luna Station. A diplomatic escort will guide you to Docking Bay 7. Please maintain current speed and heading. Luna Station was impressive for a species so new to space travel. The massive structure orbited Earth's moon and bristled with weapon systems and defense platforms. Nexera counted at least 40 different types of military hardware, from missile launchers to what appeared to be particle beam weapons. For a species that had only recently left their home planet, humans had certainly prioritized defense. As her ship docked, Nexera was met by a delegation of human diplomats and military officers. They were smaller than she had expected, but carried themselves with a confidence that suggested they were not intimidated by meeting an alien species for the first time. The lead diplomat, A woman named Sarah Chen greeted Nexara with formal courtesy. Ambassador Nexara, welcome to Luna Station. We're honored by your visit. Secretary General Martinez has requested an immediate briefing on this matter of galactic importance you mentioned. Nexara was escorted to a conference room where she found herself facing a panel of humans representing their various nations and military branches. Their questions were direct and focused, lacking the elaborate diplomatic protocols she was accustomed to among collective species. Ambassador, said General Rodriguez, a stern-faced man with numerous military decorations, you mentioned a galactic threat. We'd like to understand the nature of this threat and why you've come to Earth for assistance. Nexara activated her holographic display and began her presentation. She showed them the consumed star systems, explained the nature of the Void Swarm, and described the failed attempts to stop its advance. The humans listened in complete silence, their faces growing more serious with each revelation. When she finished, the room remained quiet for several moments. Then Admiral Park, a woman who had remained silent throughout the briefing, leaned forward. Ambassador, you said this entity has consumed 14 star systems. How many total casualties are we talking about? Approximately 60 billion sentient beings across multiple species, Nexara replied. And how long before this swarm reaches Earth? Nexara calculated quickly. At its current rate of expansion, approximately 18 months. But, Ambassador, we're not asking Earth to defend itself alone. We're seeking cooperation, perhaps some ships or technology to support our joint defense efforts. General Rodriguez exchanged glances with the other military officers. Ambassador, you said your combined fleets have been ineffective against this threat. How many ships are we talking about? The collective currently fields approximately 8,000 vessels of various classes, supported by advanced AI systems and quantum weaponry. The humans began speaking among themselves in rapid, excited conversations. Nexara heard words like threat assessment, force projection, and total mobilization. Their tone was not one of fear or hesitation, but of anticipation. Secretary General Martinez, who had remained quiet throughout the briefing, finally spoke. Ambassador Nexara, thank you for bringing this to our attention. Earth needs time to formulate a response. Can you remain here for 24 hours while our leaders discuss this matter? Nexara agreed, though she was puzzled by their reaction. Most species took weeks or months to decide on their level of support for such a massive undertaking. The humans seemed eager to reach a decision quickly. That night, as Nexara rested in her assigned quarters, she could see lights burning in government buildings across the planet. Humans were working through the night, making plans she couldn't begin to understand. Their approach to this crisis was unlike anything she had encountered in decades of diplomatic service. She had come to Earth seeking modest support from a primitive species. Instead, she had found something she couldn't yet define, but which filled her with a strange mixture of hope and concern. The humans were planning something, and from their reaction, it was going to be far more than the simple assistance she had requested. 24 hours later, Ambassador Nexara found herself in the same conference room, but the atmosphere had completely changed. The humans who had listened quietly the day before now moved with purposeful energy. Charts, maps, and technical displays covered every available surface. Secretary General Martinez called the meeting to order. Ambassador Nexara, Earth has reached its decision regarding the Void Swarm threat. Nexara straightened, expecting to hear about a modest contribution of ships or resources. Instead, General Rodriguez stepped forward with a thick folder of documents. Ambassador, the United Earth Defense Alliance hereby declares total war against the Void Swarm. We are immediately mobilizing our entire military and industrial capacity for this conflict. Every resource, every weapon, every soldier will be dedicated to the complete destruction of this enemy. The words hit Nexara like a physical blow. Total war, complete destruction. These were concepts that civilized species had abandoned millennia ago. Wars among collective members were fought with careful rules, limited objectives, and always ended with negotiated settlements. General Rodriguez, Nexera said carefully, perhaps there's been a misunderstanding. We're not asking Earth to shoulder this burden alone. We simply need additional support for our defensive efforts. Admiral Park shook her head firmly. Ambassador, with respect, your defensive strategy has failed. You've lost 14 systems in 6 months. Defensive actions only delay defeat. The only logical response is offensive action designed to eliminate the threat permanently. Dr. Williams, Earth's chief military scientist, activated a holographic display showing detailed analysis of the Void Swarm data. We've studied your combat reports extensively. This entity adapts to individual attacks and defensive strategies. But it's never faced simultaneous multi-vector assaults using completely different technological approaches. Nexera stared at the display in growing amazement. The humans had spent less than 1 day analyzing a threat that had puzzled the galaxy's greatest minds for months, and they were already proposing revolutionary new strategies. Your species have been fighting this thing one system at a time, continued Dr. Williams. This allows the swarm to concentrate its forces and learn from your tactics. We propose hitting it everywhere at once, using methods it's never encountered. General Martinez leaned forward. How many ships can your collective provide for coordinated offensive operations? Coordinated offensive operations, Nexera repeated weakly. We have perhaps 4,000 vessels remaining, but we cannot risk them in direct assault missions. The humans exchanged the same calculating looks Nexera was beginning to recognize. It was the expression of a species that saw problems as puzzles to be solved, rather than obstacles to be avoided. 4,000 ships, mused Admiral Park. Earth can provide 300 vessels within 90 days. Not much compared to your numbers, but our ships will be designed specifically for anti-swarm operations. Nexera was shocked to see holographic displays showing Earth's shipyards already converting to military production. Somehow, in less than 24 hours, humans have begun the largest military mobilization in their planet's history. We're converting every available facility to weapons manufacturing, explained General Rodriguez. Civilian factories, commercial shipyards, even entertainment complexes are being retooled for military production. Within 6 months, Earth will field a fleet of 1,200 vessels designed for one purpose: destroying the Void Swarm. The scale of commitment was staggering. Nexera had visited dozens of worlds seeking support, and most had offered what they could spare without disrupting their normal lives. Humans were transforming their entire civilization into a war machine. But the cost, Nexera protested. The economic disruption, the social upheaval. Your people will suffer greatly from such massive militarization. Secretary General Martinez smiled grimly. Ambassador, humans have been preparing for existential threats our entire history. Every generation has faced enemies that wanted to destroy everything we've built. This is just another enemy on a larger scale. As Nexera looked around the room at the determined faces of the human leadership, she realized she had made a fundamental miscalculation. She had come to Earth seeking aid from a young, primitive species. Instead, she had awakened something that the galaxy had never seen before, a species that didn't just fight to survive, but fought to win, completely and permanently. The question was no longer whether humans could help save the galaxy from the Void Swarm. The question was whether the galaxy was ready for humanity's solution. When warriors answer the call, the awakening of a warrior species. 3 months after first contact, Ambassador Nexera stood on the observation deck of the human battleship Indomitable, watching the largest military fleet in galactic history prepare for battle. The sight still took her breath away. Stretching out in all directions were 1,200 human warships, each one bristling with weapons that defied conventional understanding of space combat. The humans had done exactly what they promised. In 90 days, they had transformed their entire civilization from a peaceful, exploring species into the most formidable military force the galaxy had ever seen. Factories that once produced consumer goods now churned out weapons. Scientists who had studied climate and biology now designed new ways to destroy the void swarm. Children who had dreamed of becoming artists or teachers now trained to be soldiers and ship commanders. Captain Maria Santos, commander of the Indomitable, joined Nexura at the observation window. The human woman was young by galactic standards, barely 40 years old, but she carried herself with the confidence of someone who had been preparing for war her entire life. "Impressive sight, isn't it, Ambassador?" Santos said, her voice carrying a note of pride. 120 different ship classes, each designed for a specific tactical role. We've got heavy assault ships, fast attack vessels, electronic warfare platforms, and supply ships that can manufacture ammunition and spare parts in the middle of battle. Nexura studied the fleet with growing amazement. The Zephyrian collected ships were elegant, efficient, and built for multi-purpose roles. Human vessels looked like they had been designed by someone who expected every battle to be their last. They were angular, heavily armored, and covered with weapon systems that served no purpose except to kill enemies as efficiently as possible. "Captain Santos," Nexura said carefully, "your species has never fought an interstellar war before. How can you be so confident in your ability to defeat an enemy that has destroyed 14 civilizations?" Santos turned to look at her directly. "Ambassador, humans have been fighting existential wars for our entire history. The scale is different, but the principle is the same. When something threatens everything you care about, you don't hold anything back. You use every weapon, every strategy, every advantage you can find, and you keep fighting until either you win or you're dead." The humans' casual discussion of total commitment to warfare still disturbed Nexura. Among collective species, wars were fought with careful rules and limited objectives. The idea of fighting until complete victory or total defeat was considered barbaric. Yet, looking at the massive fleet surrounding them, Nexura was beginning to understand that humanity's approach might be exactly what was needed. "The Void Swarm has never faced anything like this," Captain Santos continued. "It's adapted to how civilized species fight, with careful tactics and measured responses. We're going to hit it with everything we have, all at once, using weapons and strategies it's never encountered." Admiral Park's voice came over the ship's communication system. "All units, this is Fleet Command. We are approaching the target system. Battle stations, all ships. Execute Operation Thunderstrike on my command." Nexura felt her skin shift to a deep blue as stress hormones flooded her system. They were entering the Kepler 442 system, where the Void Swarm had consumed 3 billion Altarian colonists just 4 months earlier. Long-range sensors showed the space where planets had once orbited was now filled with a writhing mass of dark energy that seemed to absorb light itself. "There it is," Captain Santos said grimly. "The thing that's been terrorizing the galaxy. Doesn't look so impressive when you're bringing 1,200 warships to the party." The Void Swarm was unlike anything Nexura had seen in decades of space travel. It wasn't a ship or a creature in any conventional sense. It appeared to be a living storm of dark matter that pulsed and flowed like an ocean of liquid shadow. As they watched, tentacles of darkness reached out to probe the approaching fleet, testing their defenses. "Admiral Park," came a report from one of the scout ships, "we're detecting massive energy buildup within the swarm. It's preparing some kind of weapon system." "Understood," Admiral Park responded calmly. "All ships, execute Formation Delta 7. Electronic warfare units, begin jamming protocols. Heavy assault ships, prepare primary weapons. Fast attack squadrons, initiate harassment runs on my mark." Nexura watched in fascination as the human fleet moved with precision that rivaled the most advanced military forces in the galaxy. Ships that had been built in months moved like they had been fighting together for years. The coordination was perfect, each vessel knowing exactly where to be and when to be there. The first attack came from the Void Swarm. Beams of pure darkness lanced out from the writhing mass, striking several human ships. Nexura had expected to see the vessels consumed instantly, as had happened to every collective ship that had faced similar attacks. Instead, the human ships absorbed the dark energy beams and continued fighting. Their hulls glowed with strange energy patterns as sophisticated shielding systems converted the swarm's attacks into harmless radiation. "Adaptive armor holding steady," reported the tactical officer. "The swarm's primary weapon appears to be some form of quantum dissolution beam. Our metaphysical shielding is neutralizing 90% of the effect." Nexera stared in shock. "Metaphysical shielding? How is that possible?" Captain Santos grinned. "Ambassador, humans have been dealing with things that don't make scientific sense for centuries. We call it magic, religion, philosophy, or quantum mechanics, depending on who's doing the talking. When our scientists studied your data on the Void Swarm, they realized it wasn't just a physical threat. It attacks the underlying structure of reality itself. So we built shields that protect reality." The concept was staggering. While collective scientists had tried to understand the swarm through conventional physics, humans had approached it as a problem requiring unconventional solutions. They had built defenses not just against physical attacks, but against attacks on the very nature of existence. "All ships, commence primary assault," Admiral Park ordered. What followed was unlike any battle in galactic history. The human fleet unleashed weapons that no civilized species had ever considered. Kinetic bombardment systems fired projectiles at significant fractions of light speed. Antimatter torpedoes created explosions that tore holes in spacetime itself. Quantum disruptor beams attacked the swarm at a subatomic level, unmaking its molecular structure. But the most effective weapons were the strangest. Ships fired what the humans called conceptual missiles, weapons that attacked not the swarm's physical form but its fundamental nature as a consuming entity. Reality anchors prevented it from dissolving local spacetime. Probability bombs created zones where the swarm's adaptive ability simply stopped working. "How is this possible?" Nexera asked in amazement as she watched sections of the Void Swarm begin to retreat for the first time in recorded history. "Ambassador," Captain Santos replied while coordinating targeting data, "humans have spent thousands of years fighting enemies we didn't understand. Gods, demons, diseases, natural disasters, social problems, psychological disorders. We learned long ago that when conventional solutions don't work, you try unconventional ones. When physics fails, you try metaphysics. When science fails, you try imagination." The battle raged for 6 hours. The Void Swarm threw every weapon and adaptation it had developed over millennia of consuming civilizations. Dark matter storms that should have torn ships apart harmlessly dispersed against human probability shields. Quantum dissolution beams that had destroyed planets were absorbed and converted into power for human weapon systems. Reality warping attacks that had unmade entire star systems found themselves unable to affect areas protected by human conceptual anchors. Slowly, impossibly, the Void Swarm began to lose ground. Sections of the dark mass flickered and disappeared as human weapons found ways to attack its very existence. The entity that had consumed 14 star systems was being systematically destroyed by a species that had only learned of its existence 3 months earlier. "Admiral Park," came a report from the science vessel Darwin. "We're detecting significant changes in the swarm's quantum signature. It appears to be fragmenting." "Confirmed," added another ship. "The entity is breaking apart at a fundamental level. Whatever was holding it together as a unified consciousness is failing." Admiral Park's voice carried a note of grim satisfaction. "All ships, continue the assault. Don't give it time to adapt or regroup. We end this here and now." The final phase of the battle was the most intense. As the Void Swarm began to realize it was truly losing for the first time in its existence, it unleashed desperate attacks that would have destroyed any conventional fleet. Reality itself seemed to buckle and twist as the entity tried to remake local spacetime into something more favorable to its survival. But the humans had prepared for this too. Reality anchor ships spread throughout the fleet maintained stable zones of normal physics, while conceptual warfare vessels projected fields of pure human determination that somehow made the swarm's attacks less effective simply by refusing to believe they could work. "This is impossible," Nexura whispered as she watched the dark mass continue to shrink under human assault. "No species fights like this. No one builds weapons like this. How did you know what would work?" Captain Santos was coordinating with 3 different weapons systems while simultaneously analyzing tactical data and issuing orders to her crew. She spared a moment to look at Nexara with something that might have been pity. "Ambassador, you keep thinking there are rules to this, that there are things that can't be done, weapons that can't be built, strategies that won't work. But humans learned long ago that the only rule in an existential fight is that there are no rules. When something is trying to destroy everything you care about, everything becomes a weapon. Science, philosophy, imagination, hope, desperation, pure stubborn refusal to give up. We turned all of it into tools for killing this thing." The end came suddenly. After 6 hours of continuous battle, the Void Swarm simply stopped existing. One moment it was a writhing mass of dark energy fighting desperately for survival. The next moment there was nothing but empty space where billions of tons of hostile matter had been. "All ships, cease fire," Admiral Park ordered. "Conduct immediate damage assessment and casualty reports." The silence that followed was profound. For the first time in months, the Kepler 442 system was truly empty, free of the entity that had consumed everything within it. Human ships moved through the area where the swarm had been, their sensors detecting only normal space-time and scattered particles of exotic matter. "Admiral," came a report from the science ships, "we're reading normal quantum background throughout the system. No trace of swarm presence at any detectable level. The entity appears to have been completely destroyed." Nexera felt her legs give out. She had to grab onto a support rail to keep from falling. After months of watching the Void Swarm consume system after system, after seeing the combined might of 8 civilizations fail to even slow it down, humans had destroyed it completely in a single battle. "How?" she whispered. Captain Santos helped steady her. "Ambassador, you came to Earth asking for help fighting an enemy you couldn't defeat. But you made a fundamental error in your thinking. You assumed we would fight it the same way your collective did, with the same limitations, the same rules, the same careful approach that failed for months. But we are civilized species," Nexera protested weakly. "We have protocols, agreements, ethical constraints on warfare. And that's exactly why you were losing," Santos replied matter-of-factly. "The Void Swarm didn't follow your protocols or respect your ethical constraints. It was fighting to consume everything that exists. The only way to stop something like that is to fight back with the same level of total commitment." Admiral Park's voice came over the communication system again. "All units, begin search and rescue operations for any surviving Altarian colonists who may have escaped the initial attack. Science vessels, collect samples of the exotic matter for analysis. We need to understand how this entity operated so we can prepare defenses against similar threats." Nexera realized the humans weren't just celebrating their victory. They were already planning for the next threat, the next impossible enemy that might threaten the galaxy. This wasn't just a military success for them. It was a learning experience that would make them even more formidable in future conflicts. "Ambassador," Captain Santos said gently, "I know this has been difficult for you to understand. Your species values diplomacy, careful planning, and measured responses. Those are admirable qualities that have served the galaxy well for thousands of years. But sometimes you face enemies that can't be negotiated with, threats that don't respond to careful planning, problems that require immediate and overwhelming action. The collective has survived for a millennium through cooperation and mutual aid," Nexera said, though her voice lacked conviction. "And that's exactly why you'll continue to survive," Santos assured her. "But now you have humans as allies. When diplomacy works, we'll support your efforts completely. When cooperation can solve problems, we'll be your strongest partners. But when you face enemies like the Void Swarm, enemies that want to destroy everything you've built, you can call on us to do what we do best. Which is? Santos smiled, and for the first time, Nexera saw not just the warrior, but the human being underneath. We fight impossible wars against impossible enemies and win them anyway. It's what we've been doing our entire history. The scale was just smaller before. As the human fleet began its journey back to Earth, Nexera found herself thinking about what she had witnessed. She had come to a primitive species seeking modest assistance against an unstoppable threat. Instead, she had discovered something that would change the balance of power in the galaxy forever. Humans didn't just fight wars. They fought them with a combination of advanced technology, creative thinking, and sheer determination that made them nearly unstoppable. They approached every conflict as if the survival of everything they cared about depended on complete victory, because in their experience, it usually did. The Zephyrian Collective would return to its peaceful ways, rebuilding the worlds that had been lost and strengthening the bonds between member species. But they would do so knowing that somewhere in the galaxy was a species of warriors who could be called upon when diplomacy failed and civilization itself was threatened. Ambassador Nexera smiled as she watched the stars stream past the Indomitable's viewports. The galaxy was a safer place now, not because humanity had destroyed one threat, but because humanity had announced to the universe that Earth stood ready to face any threat, no matter how impossible it seemed. And in the depths of space, other ancient evils that might have been stirring in the darkness felt the psychic echo of the Void Swarm's destruction and decided that perhaps this corner of the galaxy was best left alone. After all, there were species that fought to survive, and then there were humans who fought to win. The difference, as the galaxy was beginning to learn, was everything.